It's a beacon of stability in the Horn of Africa with a constitution, free elections and economic growth. But Somaliland wants to be officially recognised as an independent state, finally breaking the chain with Somalia. But how can it convince its troubled neighbour and the African Union?
It took a brutal war of succession and the fall of the dictator Siad Barre. But when Somaliland declared independence from Somalia in 1991, it hoped to win official international recognition. Despite 2 decades of stability and self-reliance, Somaliland says its 3.5 million people are still being denied their freedom. The United Nations says it can't recognise the country until the African Union does so first. But 2 English cities, Sheffield and Bristol, home to thousands of Somalilanders, have voted to recognise the country. Should the rest of the world do so too?
Well, that's a question we'll be asking on today's programme, and with me to discuss it are Id Hassan Musa, Director of West London Somaliland Community, Abdi Aziz Xildhiban, an author and commentator on Somali affairs, and on the line from South Africa is Professor Abdi Ismail Samatar from the School of Geography at the University of Minnesota. Gentlemen, welcome to you all.
Thank you.
I want to start off with you, Id Hassan Musa. So we have city councillors in Sheffield and Bristol making this statement, this gesture. How significant is it?
Well, it's, as we all know, it doesn't have legal weight, but it's symbolic. And it's very significant in terms of actually in sending a sign to the international community that the people of Somaliland, who were in the last 23 years building a nation from the scratch, succeeded to actually build a modern statehood, held actually few elections, parliamentary election, 2 in local elections, and 2 presidential elections. All that in free and fair elections actually declared by the international observers. That actually that nation, peace-loving people in the Horn of Africa, the Somalilanders, do deserve an international actually re-recognition.
When you say re-recognition, what exactly do you mean, and what would it enable you to do that you're not able to do at this particular point in time, after 23 years of self-declared independence?
Actually, re-recognition, I say, because Somaliland was a country that actually gained independence from the United Kingdom on the 26th of June 1960. It was the 4th country in Africa to become independent from the colonial powers. Together with Madagascar, Somalia was the 6th on the 1st of July 1960.
And your government voluntarily joined with Italian Somalia, or Somaliland, to become Somalia. And then, of course, in 1991, you seceded after some terrible bloodshed.
Yeah.
But why do you need official re-recognition now, given that you are developing, that you've had free and fair elections, that you haven't had chaos, and there are lots of people who want to do business with you?
Yeah, actually, let me go back to the history, because maybe a correction there. Somaliland and Somalia, they united and formed the Somali Republic.
Yes, indeed.
Somalia was one part of the union. 2 countries came together, Somaliland and Somalia, and they formed the Somali Republic. And judicially and legally, that country used to be called the Somali Republic. And it became defunct on the 18th of May 1991, when the Somalilanders, in the same way they joined voluntarily in union with Somalia, withdrew from that union because of the experience in the 31st years that they were in the union. So the traditional leaders of Somaliland came together from all the corners of Somaliland and decided to withdraw from the union and build...
As you feel it was your right to do. So let me put that to you, Abdi Aziz Xildhiban. Given what happened, that it was an initial voluntary agreement to form the Somali Republic, and then they had these 36 years, many of them hell, why should your brothers not be allowed, not be fully recognized by the international community?
I mean, certainly I would like to begin to establish deeply and firmly independent state, whatever it's called, Somaliland, is not really heading the right direction.
In what way?
In what way? I would like to explain to you more. I mean, we have agreed in 1960s, as he has said earlier, that Somaliland and Somalia joined and made this statement saying that Somaliland and Somalia will or shall remain forever united and in a new independent, democratic and unitary republic, where the name is...
Well, then we get a coup,
yes.
We get an overthrow of the government, right. 1969, and then we have Siad Barre for 22 years.
Yes.
You know, and then we have the punishment of the people who now live in Somaliland.
Many people still continue to say that there has been a punishment. I mean, in Somalia in general, in Somaliland, and I mean in northern Somalia.
Yeah.
But what I believe is the people that are now saying or claiming that or make that, and the people that making the people that is making that statement were part of what happened in Somalia. Unless they agree with us that whatever went wrong, we need to come together again, discuss what went wrong.
But why would Somalia and Somaliland be better together than separate if Somaliland wants to go its own way? Haven't they got the right to self-determination? They've been doing their own thing for 23 years.
I mean, and as you have said, I mean, they have the right to have their self-determination. But the question is, I mean, the so-called Somaliland territory now, they control less than 60%. I mean, there is other people that led the current leaders of Somaliland.
And who are those people?
They are from Khartoum state of Somalia. They fought each other, and Maghreb state, and there is another outer state which I think Abdi Ismail knows better than I.
Well, the question is whether those problems that you say they have are a reason to stop them having international recognition. Let's put this to Professor Abdi in South Africa. Professor, what do you make of this, the vote by those two English cities and the discussion we're having here? Because, of course, Somalilanders say we've earned the right to self-determination. Many Somalis in Somalia say we're better together.
Well, the first thing I would like to say to my two compatriots is that the history they are presenting is by and large inaccurate.
How?
That's the first thing. I'll explain. One, it wasn't the northern Somalis only who were going to Mogadishu to unite. There was a movement both in the north and in the south, because the British, the Italians, the French, the Ethiopians split the Somali people's territory into virtually 5 colonies. So it was a colonially imposed division of territory, not a Somali set. That's the first thing to note, which means that voluntary Somali agreements as free people supersede the colonial division of labor. So if the British and the Italians did this, Somalis actually freely and voluntarily came together to create a nation state out of a people who share all the cultures that any two human groups can share. So that Somali agreement supersedes and therefore nullifies the colonial territories unless we want to worship the colonial project. That's the first thing to note.
But let me interrupt you for a second, Professor, because of course the African Union talks about the inviolability of borders, those being the colonial borders, which is one reason why it doesn't want to allow the Somalilanders to go their own way. Are you saying the African Union is right when it talks about the inviolability of these borders?
No, it's actually different. The African Union in 1964 wrote that particular edict which you just stated. What has happened is that here are two voluntary people who were voluntarily unified before the colonial division of labor, who said we want to be a Somali nation state. That's the first thing. What the folks in Hargeisa, the so-called capital, are arguing is that they were separate people. I want to just tell you one thing, that I actually come from that region called Somaliland, or northern Somalia. And people like myself who are articulating a different agenda for the Somali people are not welcome in Hargeisa. So if you are talking about free and fair elections, there has to be an open debate where local people in the so-called Somaliland who are for separation and who are for union are able to ventilate their ideas without intimidation and freely.
Well, the last referendum, of course, was held in 2001, and according to official records, 97% or so of people said, yes, we want to be free, we want official recognition. Would you say that's a bogus result? What do you think would happen if there was a free and fair referendum now? If a nation or a society wants to make some major decisions, you just don't call a referendum. First of all, you have a debate about what the issues are, and then you put that to the ballot. And so there was absolutely no debate about whether we should separate or remain. There was no debate about that. That's the first thing to note. The second thing to note is that by saying that they have been brutalized, I so happen to have served in the prison of that dictator that you noted. I was a prisoner of that as a schoolboy in the north. Siad Barre. And so it's not like somebody who was in cahoots with that regime. It was an abhorrent regime. But if you actually look, it wasn't the people of Hargeisa and Burra only who were punished, as others in the country have been punished since and then. Absolutely. And so the kind of a regime dominated by the military, the prime minister of which was from the town of Berbera in the so-called Somaliland. That was the last prime minister of Siad Barre's regime, who threatened the people of Mogadishu that if they don't behave themselves, they will teach them the same lesson that they have taught the people of Hargeisa. So all right, Professor, for the moment, thank you. Thank you very much for giving us that background, Professor. Let me bring you back into this, Eid Hassan Musa. Do you recognize the picture that the Professor is painting, and would you have any problem with a free, fair and open debate which Somalilanders like the Professor could get involved in and say to the government and to you, we don't want to separate from Somalia?
Actually, I'm really very sorry to see the Professor interpreting the history in the way, in his own way, the way.
What's wrong with his interpretation?
The people of Somaliland were actually, during 6 months from December 1990 to May 1991, were actually consulting in each other, in reconciliating, thinking about the way forward after the war.
And what happened?
And what happened was the decision to withdraw from the Union. If the Professor was not at that time in the country, it's not the fault of the people of Somaliland.
I'm not sure where the Professor was. I'm sure he'll tell us.
Yeah, but his own brother, Professor Ahmed Ismail Samatar, who had the same opinion, has after 20 years actually came back to Somaliland and see the results of that decision with his own eyes. And when the professor is saying the regime has punished the people of the Somali Republic, which he is still denying the name of that former country, because it wasn't Somalia. Somaliland was never part of a country called Somalia. Somaliland was part of a union called the Somali Republic. So the regime in Mogadishu bombarded with military planes the cities of Somaliland, including Hargeisa, and 100,000 people are dead, and the evidence is there.
All right, I'm going to stop you there.
He has to tell me
Abdi wants to come in.
Which town in Somalia
Abdi wants to come in, and the Professor also wants to come in, and we have to move things forward because there are many people, many Africans watching and non-Africans who want to know where we're going to go from here, because there's a lot of division, and we're going to try and see if we can move forward. But lots of people have been getting involved in this discussion on our Facebook page, so let's take a look at a few of your comments. And we'll start off with this one from Miriam Nile, who says, "It makes me laugh that the United Nations will not officially recognize Somaliland until the African Union does. Since when did the UN place so much importance on the AU's view about anything on the continent? Clearly, there is some hidden politics going on behind the scenes. We have this post from Omar A. Islam, and Omar says, Somalia and Somaliland should come together. We are the same people, the same religion. We should be brothers and sisters and not allow the old colonial masters to have the final victory by still living by their deadly tool of divide and rule. And finally, this from Muhammad Abdi Horn, who says, Somalilanders are very proud of the stability we have and the building of our democracy. For over 20 years, we've had a peaceful transfer of power from one administration to another administration. That shows that Somaliland's democracy is mature. We also have a good relationship with the US and EU. The issue with us gaining recognition is political, not legal. There you go. And if you'd like to get in touch, here are a few ways in which you can do so.
Keep your thoughts coming in. You can email us or text us. Go to our Facebook fan page. Or you can follow us on Twitter.
Well, let's get back to our discussion now. Abdi Aziz Xildhiban, when you look at what's happening in Somaliland and you see the success and the stability they have compared to what's happening in Somalia, do you feel a sense of envy? Do you feel a sense, well, they can't go their own way, they shouldn't be allowed to go their own way? What's motivating your desire to keep them?
And first of all, let me thank to Professor and Abdi Ismail Samatar. And I would like to join him.
You have to get to your point very quickly because there isn't much time.
I'm going to get. I would like to make one thing very clear. I mean, the so-called Somaliland has been saying all along.
You keep saying the so-called.
I'm going to say what they were saying was the Somali national movement is committed to the total liberation of the Somali Republic and shall oppose any division of the country into the regions or many states that they are prejudicial to the unity of the country. That was what they were saying when they were fighting against the regime. And now easily they changed it. They moved to be a secessionist, or what I can say, and they are calling now the international community to be recognized.
They're not just calling now, they've been calling for 23 or more years.
It has never been recognized.
Why do you want to keep them? They don't want to be with you.
No, that's not true. They want to be with us, and we have got very
But he doesn't want to be with you.
Listen,
he doesn't want to be professor either.
No, listen, what I want to tell you is that there is only one clan which is calling the international community to be recognized as an independent state. There is a lot of, there is a clan system society in Somalia, and there is Warsengeli, Dulbahante, what I can say, Godibirsi, there is so many other tribes in Somalia which want to remain with Somalia. Now you have said there has been elections and 97% of the Somaliland people have voted to be an independent.
This is the referendum of 2001.
But that's not true. That has been motivated, or otherwise I can say that has been said, but that was not true. The reality on the ground is that most of Somaliland, I mean, I can say wanted to remain.
Well, look at the Somalilanders here in Britain, for example. Whether you're talking about the Somalilanders in Bristol or in Sheffield, they rose their flag after the city council voted for recognition, and they were jumping up and down in the street. I didn't see any counter demonstration.
Let me tell you, I mean, that won't change, I mean, the reality in Somalia. I mean, there is just few thousand or a few hundred of people in Bristol and Sheffield, which shows us that two cities have said the international community have to recognize.
Well, okay, we'll go back to the professor. Professor, how are we going to resolve this? Because, I mean, there were meant to be Turkish brokered talks earlier this year, but they haven't really happened. They haven't really taken off, despite the two presidents of Somaliland and Somalia saying they were minded to engage in these talks. How are we going to go forward?
Well, two things I want to say. The gentleman who was talking about me misinterpreting the history, there is an academic record which speaks to that, and I will be very happy to teach him those things. But the point I want to make here is this, and my compatriot from the other side is wrong when he divides the community into clans, because that's the very thing that has destroyed the country in the first place. If the purpose of this political project is to save the Somali people, whether they are in the north or in the south, both the regimes in the north, the politicians that is, and the politicians in the south, they are interested in their own projects rather than the well-being of the people of the Somali Republic, both in the north and in the south.
Why do you say that, Professor? Why do you say that?
Well, first of all, the reason I say this, I have traveled in both of those places. The gentleman talked about if I was there in 1991. Well, I'm sorry to disappoint him because I was present not in Bur'o, but in other parts of the country, of the so-called Somaliland. And what they did was the militiamen were the ones who forced the gathering to declare independence. That is a historical fact.
Absolutely.
And so if we want to serve the Somali people, young people are leaving Hargeisa and in the north in droves because they cannot get employment. They cannot, because the politicians are not focusing on those things. The young people in the south are exactly doing the same thing. In other words, both peoples, both in the north and the south, are being sort of hijacked by politicians.
But at the same time, Professor, if you look at the narrative, everybody's saying that at least in Somaliland there is no Al-Shabaab, there's stability, there's potential for economic development, and that's why they want to be free, so they can actually exploit what they have.
Well, the leader of Al-Shabaab comes from Somaliland. I want you to know that.
Well, that may be the case, but of course, if you look at what's happening in Somaliland, it seems to be quite stable.
Yeah. If you want to have the sort of an argumentation on itself, that's one thing. But the very reason why young people are leaving Somaliland, I met so many of them in Kenya and elsewhere, because there is no employment, there is corruption in this place. The country is not unified. The East is not quite part of Somaliland, and there is a military occupation there. And so the point we want to make is recognition is one thing. The well-being of ordinary people in both of these territories as one people is another thing altogether.
All right, Professor, let me give the final word to Eid Hassan Musa. You heard there two opinions, saying that your country is not really in a fit state to govern itself. Young people are leaving. You shouldn't be given this recognition. What do you say?
I believe Professor Abdi Samatar knows very well that in many African states, people are leaving. There is everywhere unemployment. It's the same elements, the same challenges that African states are facing, and they, not only African, but they in developing countries are facing.
But they're not persuaded. They're not persuaded.
So about the fact that actually Somaliland is an occupied territory by army, he can consult his own brother, Professor Ahmed Ismail Samatar. He was there, he went back there, and he holds actually in lectures everywhere.
So you're still determined to fight on?
Talking about what he saw in Somaliland, the reality in Somaliland.
Right.
So I invite the professor to go to Somaliland.
Maybe you can take him there yourself to Hargeisa.
With his own eyes.
All right, thank you very much.
I would like to
thank you very much indeed. We've got to stop.
Yeah,
thank you very much indeed. Because that's it for today. Thanks to all those of you who've sent in comments to us. Don't forget you can email us at the address on the screen, or you can text us, and you can follow us on Twitter. Many thanks to our guests, Eid Hassan Musa, Abdi Aziz Xildhiban, and Professor Abdi Ismail Samatar. Join us next week for another edition of Africa Today. Till then, it's goodbye. And on behalf of the whole team, thanks again for watching.